So part of the possibility would be for people who aren't just shoppers and aren't just looking for Broadway theater from Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and China to come in and see kind of perhaps some possibilities of more oppositional art and critical stuff. Yeah.
But I thought it still lacks the community or the context for it to place, so it will still be airborne stuff within West Kowloon Cultural District. If they are really to learn about all this oppositional resistance strategy, then they really have to get the feel how they was connect with their target audience. And so knowing their context is very much important, but in West Kowloon Cultural District you don't have that. So you're really presenting something in a very arty surroundings, protected.
It's funny, I mean, if you think about it's hard to know. I mean, like, I wonder what would we compare it to? Would we compare it to the South Bank, for example, in London? Would we compare it to the Kulturforum in Berlin? You know, where they have the National Gallery and the Philharmonie and the Stabi, the Staatsbibliothek Library, and the Kunstgewerbe, the arts and crafts, you know, kind of museum, which is a very empty space, but with very good content very often, but yet not a vibrant space. You know, what would it be? Would it be the Chicago's got the Gary near the lake and kind of open green space orchestra shell that people really do come out to. I mean, people say that Hong Kong is hot weather and steamy weather. It's true, but there are about 4 or 5 good months a year where it's not so hot, you know, and where it's very livable and where outdoor stuff is great. I mean, and you know, that's the same for Berlin or Chicago. You only have 4 or 5 good months a year. They're just different months. Maybe there should be a really important outdoor component to it.
Everything, I think, could be realized for good intentions. But the problem is, for example, when you are talking about outdoor space, how to use that, you really have to have that kind of culture to support it.
Yeah.
And Hong Kong people, most of the lower class have to work more than 12 hours now.
Jesus Christ.
So what spare time they have actually? So how they are not like Europeans that could go to a grassland park to enjoy the sunlight.
But it's already a very different culture. I mean, the people in Chicago want to get a suntan, for example, and they want, you know, and Hong Kong, you know, the kind of Chinese cultural life is very much based around restaurants, clubs, music. You know, it's indoor, it's driving, it's thriving. If you just go to the center of Hong Kong, it's an amazing nightlife, an amazing club culture. You know, okay, it's maybe 40% white people, but it's 70% Chinese ethnically, and it's quite extraordinary. And you know, maybe it needs, it's shopping is a big thing for Hong Kong people, and also for visitors to Hong Kong, which is again an indoor thing. I mean, maybe it needs to be a bit more in the connect, you know, of what people are used to and what people can thrive on, what people can connect to.
With what, rather we have youngsters or activists that are thinking a wholly different directions. It was because we are having enough of this shopping arcade life.
Of course.
And then we are losing all the street cultures.
Yeah.
And even for the railway stations, the railway line between West Kowloon, they are using again 600 billions to do that.
600 billion.
Look, but yet could that be if we change our mentality rather than incorporating the Pearl River Delta as the government wants, and then we could have perhaps the lower salary bottom line that we have been advocating for a long time, or then the highest working hours, then you could already change the culture substantially rather than building some infrastructure thing.
The other thing is that you guys, your community, already is committed to art. What about, I mean, why is it?
I actually can't survive by my income.
I know, of course.
So,
no, I'm not saying it shouldn't be. And of course, one thing this thing will do is, I surely don't want to advocate it per se, is open up a whole lot of new art sector jobs, just like the Tate did in London. But I mean, but in a sense, you don't have to be. Your community doesn't have to be converted to liking art and to being engaged in art. And I'm sure that, but where I agree completely with you is, what's needed is an expanded. There's a core art community, right, that includes you and maybe a couple hundred or 300 people in Hong Kong. That core should be like 5,000 people. Whatever their politics are. So I think the two questions are: one, how can the kind of committed core, who really are art sector people, be extended from 300 people to 3,000 people? For example, in Beijing, you've got 5,000 people in that core. In Shanghai, you only have 300 people.
Right.
It's true. Shanghai is a commercial culture. Beijing is a big arts culture.
I mean,
how can that be extended? But the second question is then not just that 5,000 core, which probably you got 4,000 core you can get out of 6 million people in Hong Kong, or 7 million. But then what about 400,000 people? 400,000 people who are not in the core at all, never will be, who like music, who like shopping, who are into street culture, who are into club culture, who maybe can spin off even from older people who are into opera, who knows, who can spin off from music into maybe sound and soundscape art. How can you convert then that 5,000 into 500,000? Those, I think, are the two questions,
For the core figures, I thought Hong Kong is already starting off, because 10 years before, we have only 2 universities that produce this core practitioners. But now there are different universities, creative media, Baptist Visual Arts Academy, and then art school. So there's actually a boom in this figure. I thought this figure is already gradually growing. And so we have this discussion that all these people that produce doesn't necessarily become artists, but they certainly could be this
an art sector, or an art community,
or even just a art supporter that regularly visits them.
A core.
So it takes time. So,
but do you think the education institutions can and might play a big role in this, and another possibility is kind of quasi public spaces like this one right here that you have, that could also play a really important formative role without being too precious about, we will teach you.
There is another way to do it. One is by the hardcore members respect about art. Our approach is rather to disperse this idea with fine arts, and so people could recognize from their own culture something precious that they could hold into and shape it, maybe, so that we expand the concept of art rather than bringing people to actually the core
expand the concept of art. Okay.
So that's two different approaches.
I want to end on a negative point. What is the biggest danger of the WKCD? What is the biggest missed opportunity? What is the way it could do damage to kind of the development of kind of art in the art community in Hong Kong?
It's turned into another irrelevant things, just like the Disney World that people visit in Hong Kong. That's supposed to be very entertaining things, a place for people to visit, but it has nothing to do with us.